Bruchim Haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Lamed Amud Beis. Starting with the new Gemara on Daf Lamed Amud Aleph. Our Mishnah states, upon entering the Azara, one must be toivil himself, even if he knows that he is Tohar Legamre. The Gemara asks the following: Sha'alu es ben Zoyma Tevila zu lama. Why does one have to be toivil if he knows that he's already Tohar? Says Ben Zoyma Omar Lehem Umaha Mishane Mi Kodesh Le Kodesh. If the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim, when he goes from place to place, meaning before he does the avodah in the inside and he leaves the avodah from the outside, and before when he was only going to be chayiv kares both on the outside as well as in the inside, and still he has to be toivil. So kal v'chaymer, if a person who is coming from the outside, his own personal home, which is chol, and enters the makom kodesh of the azara, where in the makom chol he was not chayiv kares, in the makom kodesh he is chayiv kares, then kol shekain he must be toivil. So if the Kohen Gadol must be toivil, then kol shekain a person should have to be toivil then also when entering the azara. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Srach Tvila Hizu Kadesh Yizkar Tuma Yishana Shabiyada V'Yifresh. Rabbi Yehuda argues, he says, not the araisa that a person must be toivil before entering the azara, but rather Srach Tvila. That means the Chachamim said that in order for him to remember that in the event that he was once tamei before, so now that he's toivil, that'll cause him to then not go and do the avodah. He won't enter the azara. By being toivil, he'll remind himself that when do people to be toivil? When they're tamei. He'll remind himself of an old tumah that he had, whereby he still needs harev shemesh. So therefore, he won't then mistakenly go into the azara and do the avodah. B'mai kamifli, ask the Gemara, what's the machlokes between Ben Zoyma and Rabbi Yehuda? Says the Gemara Daf Lamed Amud Beis at the top. Be'achule avoida kamifli. If you're mechalel the avoida, that's the machlokes. LeBen Zoyme machil avoida. Ben Zoymu says that the reason that one has to be toivil is the araisa based on that kal v'chaymer. So then, if he does not toivil and he enters the azar doing the avoida, he'll be mechalel the avoida. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda loy machil avoida. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's only a precautionary measurement to remind himself if he was once tamei once upon a time. But if he wasn't toivil, then he's not going to mechalel the avoida. Ask the Gemara, Ben Zoyma mi machil. According to Ben Zoyma, is indeed going to be mechalel the avoida. Ve'atanya, behold, it says in the Brisa, Kohen Gadol shelo toval v'loy kidesh bein beged lebeged bein avoida avoida avoda sekshero. It says a Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim, if he does not bidi eved toivel before doing the avoida, let's say from changing the avoida from bachutz to avoida bifnim, it's still going to be bidi eved kosher. The Brisa goes on to say, Echad koyin gadol v'echad koyin hedyoit sheloi kidesh yadav raglov shacharis v'ovid avodah avodas apsula. If either the koyin gadol or the koyin throughout the rest of the year enters without doing the kiddush yadav v'raglayim before the avodah, that will poisel the avodah. Nonetheless, so we see over here from this brisa that if the kohen gadol, if bidi eved he did not be toivil, and the avodah is still ksheira, then that which we're learning from that kal v'chaymer, if a person does not then toivil himself upon entering the azara, certainly bidi eved will not be poisel the avodah. Ella, so what's the machlokes between Ben Zoyma, who says deraisa, and Rabbi Yehuda, who says it's derabbanon? Ella l'meikam be'esei kamiflagi. If you're going to then stand up and be guilty of being mevatel the asay, of not fulfilling the mitzvahs asay, that's the machlokes. LeBen Zoyma koi be'esei. He's going to then stand up by not performing the mitzvahs asay. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, loy koi be'esei, that's not going to be the case. It's only derabbanon. Now, according to Rabbi Ben Zoyma, since it's a kal v'chaymer, that the Kohen, from the Kohen Gadol, who's over in Asay, that says pasuk v'rochatz es b'sara b'mayim uleveisham. So then the Kavachim will teach me that a person who does not toivel upon entering the Azara will be chayiv, will be over the mitzvahs Asay, mevatel de Asay. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda, again, it's only the Rabbon, is not mevatel and Asay. Ask the Gemara, mi islay Rabbi Yehuda hay svara. The Gemara now asks, does Rabbi Yehuda hold this svara that one must be toivel before entering the Azara midrabanan to remind them of a previous tuma? Ask the Gemara, is that so? The Hatani, we have a brisa that seems to imply otherwise. Mitzara toivel v'oime b'shar nikanor. We know when it comes to the mitzara, somebody who's stricken with saras, if he sees that he's become healed, and the Kohen then declares that he has become healed, then he needs to go through a 1 week where he's still tamei, and on that 7th day shave off the rest of his hair, and be toivel on that 7th day. So it says over here, then on the 8th day, when he brings the carbon, he has to stand on the threshold of Shar Nikanor, so that they can put the blood of the carbon as well as the oil on his right thumb and his right big toe. So it states over here, in regards to the Mitzara, on that 8th day, Rabbi Yehuda Oimer Eino Tzorich Tevila Shekvar. Sorry, the Tanakama first. Vatanya Mitzara Toivel V'Oim B'Shar Nikanor. The Tanakama says he is Toivel on the 8th day, even though he was Toivel the 7th day, the day before, and he stands on the Shar HaNikanor. Rabbi Yehuda Oimer Eino Tzorich Tevila Shekvar Tovel B'Ba'erev. Rabbi Yehuda says he does not mean to be Toivel. So you see that Rabbi Yehuda L'chara says that you don't need to be Toivel upon entering the Azara. The Gemara asks, Hahu kidetani taima. There, the reason why he doesn't have to be toivel, like the reason says, shekvar tova miberev. He was already toivel the day before on the 7th day. That's why Rabbi Yehuda doesn't require to be toivel on the 8th day. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda normally would require being toivel before entering the azara, but that reason doesn't apply over here, since the whole reason is srach tuma, and he'll be reminded from the fact that he went and was toivel on the 7th day. So that's why he doesn't have to be toivel again on the 8th day. Now the Gemara asks, Udekarila, my karila. So why were we even investigating? Why were we being oisek in this brisa in the first place, when the brisa itself says explicitly that he doesn't toivel on the 8th day, according to Rabbi Yehuda, because he already was toivel on the 7th day? Explains the Gemara, Mishum de kaboy lemirma achriti. The Gemara wants to ask really from a third brisa onto this brisa. Again, this brisa states that he doesn't have to be toivel the Mitzara on the 8th day, because he was already toivel the day before on the 7th day. But that's contradictory to the following brisa. Ola lishkas ha-mitzaroin. He goes up to the lishka, to the room, the chamber of the mitzaroim. Why is it a chamber of mitzaroim? Shesham mitzaroim toivel. That's where the mitzaroim are toivel. Rabbi Yehuda Omer loy mitzaroim bilvad amru ela kol adam. Rabbi Yehuda says not only the mitzaroim, but everybody. And therefore it says that you must then be toivel before entering the Azara. Mashma, even the Mitzara must be toivel before entering the Azara. That would be a contradiction to what he said, L'chara, in the previous brisa that says he does not have to. Gemara says, Lo kasha, ha de tovel, ha de la tovel. There's a difference in the first brisa. There he was already toivel on the 7th day. Therefore he doesn't have to be toivel on the 8th day. Whereas this third brisa is talking about where he did not toivel on the 7th day. That's why he has to be toivel on the 8th day. The Gemara is not happy with that. On that, the Gemara asks the following question: if that's so, says the Gemara, then if he was not toivel on the day before, on the 7th day, and he's only toivel now on the 8th day, then he needs Herev Shemesh. That means he won't be able to then enter the Azara and bring the karbonos necessary, because he needs to wait till the nightfall. And since he only brings the carbon, he's only toivel on the 8th day, he would have to wait till the day afterwards. And that's not going to be sufficient for the 8th day. Ella, says the Gemara, you're right. Idi ve'idi de tovel. In both cases, in Bryce's second Bryce as well as the third Bryce, he was toivel. So why in the second Bryce he does not have to then, so why doesn't he have to toivel again on the 8th day, whereas on the third brisa implies that he does have to toivel. Ha de asech daite, ha de lo asech daite. When it comes to the second brisa, he was not mesiach das. So therefore, when he's toivel on the seventh day, he can rely on that. Whereas on the third brisa, there he was mesiach das. So even though he was toivel on the seventh day, that would require him to be toivel again on the eighth day. Again, the Gemara is not happy with this because if he was mesiach das, his mind became diverted, then it wouldn't be good enough for him to be toivel on the eighth day alone. Then he would require then a whole process. Hazal shlishi v'shvi boy. He would have to have a whole another week with a sprinkling of the para aduma on the third and the seventh day, because maybe he came in contact with a mace. Bar Mosun, Omar Rabbi Yochanan, Hesech Hadas, Tzarech Hazah, Shlish V'Shvi. If one's mind came diverted, then perhaps he then came in contact with a mace, and therefore he needs to go through the process of being sprinkled by the mechatos on the third and the seventh day. So Gemara says, Eli Idi v'Idid loy asach daite. Really, both of them, they were toivel on the seventh day, both cases, the second brisa as well as the third brisa. And they both were not mesiach das. So why does the third brisa require him to be then toivel on the eighth day? When it came to the second brisa, the reason why he does not have to be toivel on this eighth day again is because when he was toivel on the seventh day, it was al das kain. That means he had das to enter the mikdash, so that was sufficient. But in the third brisa, although he was toivel on the seventh day, he didn't have intention to be nichnas to the mikdash, to bias mikdash, and therefore he'd have to be toivel again on the eighth day. That's one answer. The Gemara now brings another alternative answer. V'bois ema tni loy mitzaroin amru ela kol adam. Teach that not the mitzaroin did they say, but kol adam has to be then toivel before entering, and that would be complete consistent with Rabbi Yehuda Shita. That means that the second brisa states that indeed. That he does not have to be. Sorry, the third brisa states that he does not have to be. He would not have to be toivel on the eighth day, just like the second brisa states. So that would be consistent with his opinion. Ravina offers a third understanding, a third reconciliation. Rabbi Yehuda ledivreim derabbanon kamerlu. Rabbi Yehuda was saying according to the shita of the Rabbanon, and that's what he was saying. Lididi, according to me, my shita, mitzara ein tzarich tvila. I do not require the mitzara to make a tvila, says Rabbi Yehuda. But lididchu, but according to you, oidi li izi mihas deloy mitzaroim bilvad omru ela kol adam. But you should at least agree with me that not only does the mitzaroin have to then make a tefillah, but everybody would have to make a tefillah. In other words, when it comes to then entering the azara, you would have to agree with me that people do have to make a tefillah midrabanan to then ensure that maybe they weren't tamei from before, as a reminder. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda understands the Chacham as saying they don't require a tefillah altogether. If they think that they're tamei, there's no requirement to make a tefillah for srach tuma. On that, Rabbi Yehuda says you should agree with me. If not the mitzara, but at least kol adam should be required to then make a tefillah before entering the azara. Rabbanon mitzara dayish betuma. Rabbanon answer, when it comes to mitzara, they are stepping on tuma, meaning that they're involved with tuma all the time, and therefore there's a greater concern when it comes to mitzara, since they're tamei anyways as a mitzara. So therefore they're not careful when they come in contact with other things to mitame it, because it doesn't make it any greater, the tuma, than it was before, since they're already in a state of tuma. However, kol adam lo da'ishi betuma. But the Rabbanan say, but everybody else who's not treading, they're not stepping on tuma, they don't have the involvement with tuma, then if they believe that they're tahor, there's no reason for them to go into the mikvah before entering the azara. So according to this, the Chum do not require at all entering going to be toivel upon entering the azara. Omar le Abai le Rabbi Yosef. Abai asked Rabbi Yosef the following question: Name a Rabbanan the Pliga Alid Rabbi Yehuda ben Zoyma. Svirulu. Is the Rabbanan arguing on ben Zoyma? Are they saying that indeed there's no requirement to then enter the Azara midiaraisa with the Torah oneself midiaraisa upon entering the Azara? Asked Abai to Rav Yosef, and therefore the Rabbanan don't hold the ben Zoyma. Ben Zoyma says you do have to, whereas Rabbanan said you do not have to. There's no requirement. And that which it says by the mitzara, because really you would not require it upon entering the Azara on the 8th day, only is to come to show the power of Rabbi Yehuda. That Rabbi Yehuda said if you already toivel, the mitzvah was already toivel on the 7th day, then he would not have to be toivel on the 8th day. Whereas the Chachamim say that, and therefore that's only to show the strength of Rabbi Yehuda's shita. That's why you don't have to be toivel, because you already toivel the 7th day. Oy Dilma, shiny mitzara the daish betuma, or maybe mitzara is different, and that's why the Chacham require the tuma, the mitzara rather, to be toivel on the 8th day, because since there's a greater heightened problem of a mitzara always being involved with tuma, therefore the mitzara is not careful. He comes in contact with things because he's been used to then coming in contact with things and being with them. So he doesn't have that heightened sensitivity anymore. So we require him to then be toiv on the 8th day. Omarle, Rav Yosef responds to Abaye, the latter of the two. Studim. Shiny mitzara the dayish betuma. Indeed, that the reason why the Rabbanan require the mitzara to be toivel on the 8th day is because they're dayish betuma. They're constantly involved with tuma, and therefore there's a requirement that before they enter the Azara, we have to ensure that they are tahor by going to the mikvah, and therefore they're really like the brisa, like the Rabban of the third brisa that says that the mitzara in the third brisa states that they don't need, be'etzem, a person does not need to the mitoivel in the mikveh before entering the Azara. Mitzara is different. Mitzara, again, because they're dayish betuma, they have to be toivel before entering the Azara even on the 8th day.